All right, welcome to this week's Huddle, everybody, where we're going to be reminding ourselves how to write an offer. I'm chuckling because we're like, I can't write an offer. So I know we all have those moments where we're freaking out, like, how do I write an offer? So today is all about constructing an offer. We'll save the other questions for another Huddle. We're just going to be talking about writing an offer today. So does that sound okay to everybody? Is that good? All right. We do have some Q&A at the end that maybe will blend a few things together, but we'll see how we do with time. Joined today in Huddle by a lot of our leadership. So Mike, thanks for being a co-captain. And I think Rob will jump on soon. I see Mark O'Brien in his hotel room. It looks like
in Celebi.
I know. Doesn't it look like a hotel room?
Well, it's very homey with this lamp.
The lamp and
Yeah.
it looks like you could be anywhere, you know. No, he's at Saddleview. Many of us haven't gone much of anywhere lately because we're dealing with all of this. So, you know, it's been a really fun summer. Anyway, thanks you guys for taking the time. We're going to get right into it. I know everyone's busy and lots going on. So, Mike, do you want to start us off and let's share a screen and let's just begin at the top of the REPC and just get a running start. Not going to go through the whole REPC, obviously. We're just going to talk about 4.3 and how we're going to structure this. And so just because when you're thinking about the deadlines of the REPC, remember the first one that we have is earnest money. And then we're going to get down to this section where we have the 4.3 E. So let's say I'm writing an offer for my buyer client. Of course, I've already got agency established. I already have the signed BBA before I even showed the property. And whether or not I know what the offering is from the listing company, frankly, it doesn't matter. It's not material enough for us to get hung up on whether I know or not. Okay, so just whether you know or not, you can still just write in the REPC. Now, we heard a lot of feedback, didn't we, Mark, in Park City in-person sales meeting that we would prefer to just put it all in the REPC, right? So here we are. We're going to put it in the REPC. There was a few loose ends, if you remember from sales meeting, when we talked about just putting the compensation in the REPC. So we're going to tighten those up today and tell you how we do that. So let's just go through it. It says seller and buyer agree that the seller shall contribute X percentage. So simply put, if we have 3% in our buyer broker agreement, we're just going to mark that box and we're going to put 3% right there. So what do I do with the next box? And it says to buyer's brokerage or a dollar amount, and we would just put 0 there. Okay. And then it says, if applicable, seller's contribution. If no box is checked, then seller has not agreed to compensate buyer's brokerage. So if this one is inadvertently left blank, then we're not going to get compensation from seller, which means we'd be getting it from the broker or the buyer directly. Okay. Right, Mark? How are we doing so far?
Doing great so far. Looks good.
Okay. See how easy this is? Everyone right now is going, well, I can do this. But buckle up, folks. Make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened. Tray tables are up because we're going to get some turbulence here in a second. But it's just fine. We're all going to get to Disneyland just fine. Okay, so then the next says, so the boss is not checked. The seller has not agreed to compensation of buyer's brokerage in the REPC. This payment shall be made in addition. So this is where we get, the confusion starts to happen right here in this sentence, right? Because it says this payment, referring to the one above, is made in addition to any other compensation agreed to by the seller to buyer's brokerage, or seller's brokerage to buyer's brokerage. Buyer agrees that the seller's contribution combined with any other payments from seller's brokerage, if applicable, to buyer's broker shall not exceed the amount agreed to between buyer and buyer's brokerage in their written buyer-broker agreement. Okay, how are we doing so far? Well, the only thing we really have to deal with confusion is this statement about in addition, okay? And I think people will raise it. they'll say, are you sure I'm only paying 3? Why does it say in addition? And you'll need to walk everybody through that there's not another agreement here, and it's not there. Okay, is everybody good so far? Any questions to that point? Check the chat. Sorry, I don't have the chat up. Mike, are you monitoring the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
One question, if you choose a percentage, should you put NA in the dollar amount?
NA or 0.
NA or 0, okay.
Well, the reason that's there, if there was any dollar amount that you wanted to add, you can certainly do it there. It's just this is the UAR Forms Committee going to the state, getting the approval, making sure there's flexibility for all the business models that are out there. That's why that's there. Okay. All right. Now, so now we're going to get a little bit more complicated. Okay. So let me tee this up, and then Mark, we'll hand it over to you. So Mike, get ready to, let's get that addendum up.
Which one?
The new one we sent you.
Okay.
So we have some loose ends with 4.3. Okay. If you remember, by contrast, the broker agreement, fee agreement, remember the broker. So Park City, it looks like this, right? Remember that fee agreement from the brokers? And
That's
then,
not it.
yeah, then we had this one, right? Remember those two forms? So we've got the broker for, these are the broker to broker forms. There's language in here that needs to be added to 4.3. Okay, so just everyone stay with me, okay? This is actually really simple because we only need what you just saw, 3% in that 4.3, and we just need this addendum and we're done. It's just a normal REPC, okay? Everybody looking at that, not that addendum, we need
that one, the other one.
Yep, not that one. Coming up, Heidi, just one sec. We just pull it up here, and we'll be sending it to everybody. You'll have these right away. Sorry, Joe. Guess what? We got some more forms to put up.
Oh, hold on. Little one more minute. One sec.
Well, Mike is finding that form. Would you guys like
There we
to
go.
be regaled at the property deficits of radio buttons? I filled Mark in last week. It's
Yes.
fascinating in when you fill out fake forms digitally editable. There's all kinds of new rules.
Really? All right. I guess got to get that to fit the window. Can everybody see that okay? If you blow it up, you can see that. It's really just 3 sections, guys, and we're taking the sections from the broker fee agreement. So the one problem that we have theoretically here with 4.3 is we have not declared what our BBA says to the other side. And if we don't do that, then the listing agent's going to ask you, Nancy, send me your buyer broker agreement. And you're going to go, I really rather not do that. So if we affirm it in the addendum here, we skip that whole step of having to send the BBA to a listing agent. Everybody with me on that? It's just simple. We're just going to declare it in this addendum. So in section 1, it says, in regards to 4.E of the REPC, buyer has entered into a written buyer broker agreement with buyer's brokerage. That obligates the buyer to pay the buyer's brokerage a real estate broker fee in the amount equal to 3% of the gross acquisition price. Established by the buyer's obligation may be satisfied by a third party. So we come out and we affirm it. This is signed by the buyer. This goes with their offer. So we're telling the other side, including the seller, not just the listing agent, that we, yes, in fact, have a BBA. Okay. Number 2, same language, by the way, that exists in the broker to broker share agreement. This is not, it's the same paragraph, you guys. So we can affirm it broker to broker. We're now going to affirm it if we use the REPC. Second paragraph, with regards, again, to 4E, prior to settlement, the buyer shall deliver to the title company a copy of the BBA to confirm it. So I'm affirming it first, and then I'm going to go through the procedure of making sure that we give a copy of that agreement, not to the listing company, but I'm going to give that to the title company. Okay, why do we do that? Now let's theoretically talk about why do we think we need this language. first of all, the listing agent has some duty of reasonable care to confirm that their seller is not going to be obligated to pay more than the BBA. We all know that to be a rule. So we're not going to be able to just skip over that. And it seems to be now we've got this process starting to bake out, and it's going across the whole state, where the title company is going to be the one that's going to confirm that BBA, not the listing company. Okay. So we've addressed that now. So 4.3E becomes more fuller, okay, with all these other stipulations. Now let's go to number 3. And this one will put everyone at ease with that language that says, in addition to. Remember how they're going to go, I'm nervous about this. I really just want to know what the total is, right? So I like that word total. So this is what we put in 3. Again, in regards to section 4.3E, and for clarification purposes, seller and buyer acknowledge and agree that there is no additional compensation agreed to by seller's brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. Therefore, the total compensation is. So we just clarified it. So this addendum should put everyone at ease. It puts our listing agent at ease, and it clarifies it for our buyer and the seller that that's the total. The number I put in 4.3E in the REPC becomes the total compensation owed.
All right, let's take a quick break here. Peter
Yes.
has a question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Hey, before you ask your question, Peter, just so you guys know, we're pretty much done with how to put it in the REPC. That's it. We're done. We filled it out. We added the addendum. We're done. Now it's just a normal contract. Go ahead, Peter.
Hey, so just a quick question. So why do I care as a listing agent what a buyer has signed with their buyer as far as their compensation goes? If my seller's only willing to pay up to a certain number, why do I care to see their buyer broker agreement? It is what it is.
Yeah. Actually, precisely for that reason, because your seller can only pay the maximum of that BBA. So let's just say someone said to you 3 and put 3 in section 4.3, but their BBA, in fact, only says 2.
Right.
So now you care as a listing agent, because that's 1% that my seller does not have to pay. So you have a duty as a listing agent. This makes my point, that there's a reasonable care duty here to make sure that we're confirming the offer that was originally put out there up to 3. Let's just say, you said, I'm up to 3. Someone says, what's your compensation? Say up to 3. Then comes the offer, and we find out later that BBA was only 2. So this is why we need this language to confirm what the BBA is.
We don't need to see their BBA. We can just take the word of the agent.
No.
Or do we have to physically see their buyer broker agreement?
Well, this is exactly why we put the language in there, so we don't have to go grab confidential buyer broker agreements from some buyer in their brokerage have a confidential agreement that we just need to affirm what it is, and we'll leave that duty of seeing the agreement up to the title company.
Right.
So it's the title companies that is going to want to ask the buyer's agent for this, not necessarily the listing agent.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
That's right.
That's right. The listing agent has no role in requesting this.
Oh, okay. Perfect. That's what I was just curious to know, why we ask for it.
We're trying to take it away from the listing agent asking for it, because frankly, it's inappropriate for a listing agent to ask for a confidential agreement between buyer and buyer's brokerage.
Right.
Agreed.
Perfectly appropriate for the buyer and the buyer's brokerage to provide that to the title company.
Perfect.
Yeah, and yet as listing agents, we need to have them affirm what that number is, and then have some mechanism to confirm it, and actually have someone put eyes on that document. And it seems nice to have a third party, right? Title company is a third party, unbiased, to look at that. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh,
So on the REPC, if we put the compensation amount into the REPC, then we have to use the addendum to accompany that. Is that correct? Or I'm sorry, I'm just confused on that aspect.
Mark, I think yeah, I have to, because it's too silent on these other issues of, like Peter was just bringing up. How do we know what their BBA is? How do we handle
So
all
here's,
that?
so then let me
Yes.
rewind for a second then.
Yeah.
So on the, and sorry, I don't have the form in front of me, and I was just doing a deal last night where the agent sent me a text. He says, "Hey, Nancy, I've got a 3% BBC. And what are you offering your side?" I said 3%. He sent me the agreement over. I signed it. He signed it. The brokers still need to sign it. In that case, that spells it out, right? I mean, it
Well,
says in there, this is just,
and Nancy, you're talking about the broker sharing agreement.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, right now we're in the just putting it all in the REPC. But yes, what you just described sounds correct. And we'll shift to that. And again, constructing offers, we fundamentally can do it two ways, right? We can either put it all in the REPC, or we can use the broker to broker compensation. Not to further confuse it, but there are cases where we could actually use a combination of both of them.
But
But
Will, shouldn't this, if there's an addendum, right, in a REPC, shouldn't it say somewhere in that compensation, see addendum 1 as well? I mean, right now you're just saying add an addendum and you don't have it in there anywhere to be added. You're just saying, hey, by the way, add it.
Yes, because we are not the state of Utah Attorney General's office at Brookshire. If we would, we'd had a lot better language. Sorry. I mean, it's just and look, everyone's flying as fast as they can go on this. It wasn't easy even getting that language into the REPC. So we kind of have what we have. Just be grateful that we can create these addendums that clarify these issues and add it, and now we're protected. Otherwise, everybody else is just blind in these two areas, and it could come back and bite them.
Yeah, for agents putting their offer in the REPC, this avoids all the questions and the lack of clarity going forward. And I think this addendum, to the extent it's not incorporated into the body of the REPC by the state, this is going to become pretty standard practice, because we've already seen the big problem of listing agents say, well, send over your BBA. It's required for me to, my seller's requiring it in order to accept your offer. Well, this kind of precludes all that sort of argument, all that nonsense. It takes care of it right here in this addendum. So these are going to become very commonplace for agents who are only using the REPC to deal with compensation.
Hey, Mark, would it be appropriate to kind of talk about this? The buyer fee sharing agreement is kind of like a letter of intent, where basically
we're going to get to that. We're focused right now on offers in the REPC.
Right. But anyway, the buyer fee sharing agreement is kind of, here's what we're proposing. Here's my buyer's agent's agreement. Here's what the seller is paying, and then incorporating those terms into the REPC using this form here. But it's almost like a commercial transaction where you want to know what the preliminary details of the contract are going to be with that brokerage fee sharing agreement, but it's really not an addendum to the REPC. But so we have to incorporate it in using this document here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallelism between the commercial world and what we're doing right now. And we're all going to be fine, you guys. It's really just, this is where it's confusing. This reminds me a lot of the short sell days, where in 2008, we were bombarded with all these forms about how to deal with third-party short sell agreements. And it took us a while to wrap our heads around it, and we were just fine. Frankly, I would rather have this than short sells any day.
Yeah.
Short sell. Yeah. So
yeah, let's get to a few questions in the chat. Does Leslie ask, does it need to be sent to both title companies?
I don't see any reason why you'd send it to the listing agent's title company. No.
Okay.
Does anybody disagree?
I don't. I think that's fine. One title company. I mean, whoever the title
their
company.
Own. Yeah. I think the whole purpose is this, so we don't have to see it. And so to send it to the listing title company is sort of negates that purpose, which is Mike's question. Will share with their client, might need confidentiality language. I think, Mike, that's what we're addressing here. Yeah, I think the buyer's title company is probably the only one that we should expect to receive this to verify. Leslie asks, as listing agents, if I get a REPC from a buyer with the amount in their REPC, am I countering with this form?
As a listing agent, if there's and you're not countering the number?
Yeah, let's say we accept a number. Are we countering with this form?
Yes.
Yes, you would.
Yeah. This is where, back to Peter's original question, why do I care about their BBA? I care about their BBA because I have a duty to confirm my seller does not overpay. And if we leave it only to section 4.3 of the REPC, and everybody wants it to be simple, I hear you, but if you leave it to 4.3 alone, you're not addressing this issue that we as listing agents have a duty to confirm that they didn't do it. Now, we're not policing it. We don't need to see it, but we need to put some mechanism in place to know exactly and have the other side affirm and declare. First, they declare, and then we confirm. Declare what your fee is, it's 3, and then confirm it with the title company, and then we feel like we've done our duty as a listing company. So yes, Leslie, we would counter with this form.
Okay, Ryan asks.
One more thing, especially if they called you up and said, Leslie, what is your broker sharing compensation commission? And you said 3%, right? You told them 3%, then they wrote you an offer and they put it in the REPC. It's exactly why you want section 3 to say it's only 3%, even though I told you 3, broker to broker, right? We're only going to get it from one place. You know, this is putting it in the REPC, right? We're only going to get it from the seller. We're not getting it broker to broker. This is where we put it. And we clarify, make everyone feel comfortable. The total commission owed is 3% to the buyer side. So that's a very good form to counter with from the listing side. Yes. Go ahead. Next question.
In section 2, should it say buyer's agent provides to title instead of buyer? That could be a good clarification.
No, remember, this is a REPC between a buyer and seller. So buyer's agent can't agree to anything in here. It's buyer agreeing to it. And buyer couldn't, yeah.
Jackie asks, are we going to then be getting other brokerages versions of this form? So meaning, you know, are we going to see another brokerage's idea like this in a while?
We may. I have to think some other brokerages see these shortfalls as well, especially since the brokerage fee agreement came out. So we may see other iterations of it. Yes.
Okay.
I think everyone's going to have to get very, very, very comfortable with moving targets on some of these forms. Not everybody has the benefit of in-house counsel. The rest of the industry pretty much relies on the UAR. And as we pointed out, that there are some holes in the UAR processes and forms right now. Instantly enough, I think we told everybody in sales meetings, but they did reach out to Mark recently and Rob and ask for their input on how we handled our listing agreement. We didn't share all of our cookies with them, but it is interesting that they're starting to see where the deficiencies are and correct some of these things. So in time, we hope that the UAR forms will come up a bit in standard. In the meantime, our job is to give you the upper hand and to protect you regardless. We're not dependent on the UAR, fortunately. We are moving a lot faster. I mean, these forms were basically written in the last 2 days, and we're getting them to you right now, okay? So otherwise, we could wait months and months and months for UAR to move on some of these things. So, okay, next question.
Walk us through what happens when a listing agent is only offering 2.5%, and I'm assuming we, as the buyer's agent, put in the REPC 3%. So walk us through that scenario.
Okay, so you called them up and they said 2.5 or 2, and your BBA says 3. So, well, I mean, you guys tell me, what would you do there? Wouldn't you just write the offer at 3?
Yes.
The seller signs it, it's 3.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an offer of compensation. You know, like here's my list price, and my offer of compensation is 2%. So just submit your offer at 3%. Think of it a lot like closing cost concessions. The builder says, at this price, we'll offer $10,000 in closing cost concessions. and your buyer needs $20,000 in closing cost concession. So it's the same way to think about how to structure the offer. So you can write in, I would just write in the 3%. And the agents who understand how to present their value first to their buyer and construct offers and present them properly are the ones that are going to convince the other side to pay that fee. Now, the other hand, remember, the other hand of this is, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Have you ever in your life allowed someone else to determine your value? I mean, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope. We don't allow other people to tell us what our value is. You know, like that's even a life lesson, right? I mean, if someone does it, they don't like me, so then I'm not likable. I mean, come on. We decide our value, and we decided with our client that it's 3%. So write the offer at 3%. I know that's a more simple. There's always variations, but that's what I would do. Okay, next question.
Peter, take it away, and then we'll get to Julie. Julie, you'll go after Peter.
Okay.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oodles of questions, but so just basically, Mark, I know you said the REPC obviously is between the buyer and the seller. Okay, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when it says under section 4.3E, seller's compensation contribution to buyer's brokerage. So does that now pull the brokerage in under this section where you're saying, no, this is just between the buyer and seller, but we're now saying we're giving compensation to the buyer's brokerage, which is the company now. So
right.
Aren't we pulling the company in now? So is it necessarily just still buyer and seller, or is it now between obviously buyer, seller, and company?
No, it's still between the buyer and seller. And the reason that language is that way, remember, the buyer has an agreement, has a BBA with the buyer's brokerage that obligates that buyer to pay, in this scenario, 3%. And in the REPC, the buyer is asking the seller, is saying, right, seller, I have this obligation. I need you to pay my buyer's brokerage at closing. Okay. And so that's why the buyer's brokerage is referenced. Otherwise, it would be the money would be going from seller to buyer's brokerage. It's easier just at closing to have the seller agree to pay the buyer's brokerage and satisfy or offset a portion of the buyer's obligation to the buyer's brokerage. But the brokerages do not become party by virtue of this language.
Okay, so when we use the addendum, then that brings in the brokerages, the compensation for the brokerage, right?
It does not bring
on the ones we've talked about. Not yet. Only way to bring the brokers in is the broker to broker compensation agreement.
And that's what you're saying we need to fill out and attach to the REPC.
Not yet. I mean, right now we're in the REPC. Okay. We have two ways to do it, fundamentally, right. Two ways, and we're still on way number one. Okay. We wrote it in the offer, we put it in 4.3, we added this addendum, and we're done. Okay. We're done. And then if we want to go the other way, we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah, this is strictly the buyer and seller negotiating compensation to the buyer's brokerage in the REPC.
Yeah.
Okay. No involvement technically of the brokerages.
Okay.
And remember, there's REPC language that says third parties are not parties to the contract, like other mentioned parties, title companies, other warranty companies are not parties to it. They might be affected by it, but they're not parties to it. So, okay, Julie Livers, is she next? Is that Mike, right?
Yep. Go ahead, Julie.
So my question is, if we're going to be countering other people's offers on our listing with our addendum from Berkshire Hathaway, obviously, like Mark said, we assume these other brokerages are going to be doing the same thing. Not having a law background, I'm a little nervous about my interpretation of one of these forms before signing it or having my client sign it. As they start coming in, can you guys as an office, start looking at those and then maybe send out an email like, okay, we've approved ABC Realties, this realty, I don't know how to go about it because I'm out of my comfort zone if it's another brokerage.
Absolutely. Julie, if another company is coming up with something that we feel like it's okay, that doesn't mean we want to just, blindly accept things, but I get your point. It's going to be like this for a while, guys, as everyone tries to come up with a standard. We're really trying again. Well, I know we're leading the industry and what we're hearing, what the feedback we're getting, but we got to get everyone caught up, and we always work well with each other. That's the nature of being a real estate agent, is that we cooperate with each other. And we would really prefer to have unilateral standardized forms that we are all comfortable and know. Right now, that does not exist. But so good point, Julie. I'll make a note of that to mention that in managers meeting. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
All right, Scott, I'll read Scott's question. I think we need a little clarification though, Scott. What if the listing agent was prepared for a broker payment addendum and she receives an offer with BAC and the REPC?
You want to take it, Mike? You can take
well,
that.
I guess.
Either way, how is that countered, and what if?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Between the two agents would certainly clear this up from the get-go if they are in fact offering a BAC.
So I see what you're saying. So yeah, I think if the agent, I don't know that the situation changes dramatically. If in this scenario we're the buyer's agent and we are putting our compensation in the REPC and we're following up with this addendum that we're reviewing, that's our preference here in this scenario. And if the listing agent doesn't want this scenario, they would prefer a different scenario, then I think this is part of the conversation we're having about compensation and how we want to establish it from the beginning.
Okay, so this is our preferred scenario is in the REPC. What conditions would change that?
Actually, to be clear to you there, no one's really making a determination on what's preferred yet. I don't know that I think you just have to look at your two tools and you guys have to decide which route you want to go.
What do you recommend, especially if the listing agent has already made it clear that he's offering 3 or she is offering 3?
Yeah. I mean, I would love for it to be pretty straightforward, but we'll save that for the broker to broker for right now. But right now we're just saying the way to go for the REPC. And Scott, to your point, that's why we put in section 3 of this addendum to make sure that we re-clarify that the total fee, even if we've had conversations with this listing agent about a broker to broker fee, we're going, guys, the total is 3. We're just going to put it here. Even though we were talking about it, we've just put it in the REPC. And here that's the purpose of the addendum, to make everyone feel comfortable. We needed the words that said total, right? The total is. That makes everyone calm down, right? I mean, it's yeah. I mean, that's the purpose of it. So yeah, next question.
I think we've covered them. Okay. And I know a lot of people are having questions about why we're re-clarifying the language in the REPC. That 4.3 language does not, maybe the best way to describe it, it doesn't close a loop. It creates more questions, that paragraph.
Right. That's right.
So if it creates more questions, then that means there's ambiguity and we're trying to clarify what's going on. So it's not a closed loop, that paragraph, right? What other parts of the REPC are like, hey, this may happen, you want to go check it out, or it may not. Like, we don't know. Like, that really doesn't happen in our REPC. So this is our solution to that. One more question from Susan just came in. Should the title of this addendum is addendum number, should it be renamed addendum number 1 so we have it always included? Interesting suggestion.
No, it can't be, because it might be a counter offer. It might not be addendum 1.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, can we name it something so when we're pulling up addendums, like in DAT-Loop or Transaction Desk, we know which one to pull up?
Yeah,
we absolutely can.
Okay.
It's a good catch. And we were talking about the name this morning. So
okay. All right. Just because I'm on the forms committee in Park City, and then, or could it be like, it can't really be an exhibit to the. No, it can't be an exhibit to the REPC. No, that's too complicated.
This will be like naming the Utah Hockey Club.
I proposed addendum lightning, and Mark shot me down. Like, He gave me this weird look. It was really insulting, but whatever. I mean, people would remember addendum lightning like that. Like, you wouldn't even have to think about it.
Or addendum headache or something.
There we go. Like something.
Okay, let's put a bow on this one. We're more than halfway through, so let's go now to the broker compensation. But before, I think what you need to do in your head is, look, we're going to give you these copies. Everyone's going to get them today, but you've got to explain the 3 reasons why we need that addendum. All right, we need it, 1, to affirm and declare what the BBA is. 2, to put a process in place of confirming it. So if someone puts eyes on it, that's the title company. And 3, to give everyone some peace that the total amount owed is no more than the number that's put in that form. So 3%. Okay, that's the 3 reasons. And that's why we added the addendum to 4.3. Okay, and it's pretty straightforward. You just go right down and you just wrote your offer and you're good. Okay. All right, now to broker. Everyone's still buckled up?
Favorite.
Okay. Okay, so this one you're looking at so just, Mark, do you want to tell everybody how we got to this version and just the quick history of this one? I know we've already done this a little bit, but maybe a reminder of how we arrived at this form.
Sure. This particular form you'll see the Berkshire Hathaway logo at the top, very important. Remember, in the first training we went through, we talked about the UAR addendum. And then we asked you not to use that UAR real estate brokerage compensation agreement because it didn't protect the listing brokerage to the extent the parties the buyer and seller reduced the amount of BBC in a REPC, like we just talked about. Through negotiations back and forth, buyer and seller were free to reduce the compensation in a REPC, and the listing brokerage was still on the hook pursuant to the UAR version of this agreement to pay the full amount of whatever they agreed to in this agreement. It was a shortcoming. We had to close that loop.
Yeah, so now we feel like we can use it on either side, and that was the problem. We could only use the UAR one on the buyer side,
Right.
And now we can use this one for both sides, okay? So now, in this case, when we go to write an offer, let's give the scenario that I called Mike up and I said, Mike, hey, how's things going? I'm just left your listing. Thanks for turning the lights on. It was wonderful. It looks like we're going to get an offer to you. And you had mentioned to me earlier that the compensation to the buyer's brokerage was how much, Mike? 3%? Okay. So pretty straightforward. So we decided to go this route. And what we're doing is we're going to create the broker compensation agreement along with the offer. Okay. So we went through this earlier, so I hope we're not having to go through every line here, but we're going to write a term for this. And so we've advised that this term is fairly short because it already has language that it extends for closing. Can you highlight that, Mike, the last sentence? So whatever the term is, let's say you just did, a week, 7 days on this agreement, that it automatically extends. Term shall automatically extend. There it is. Okay, so under contract, you might have a tendency to say, well, we're not closing for 6 weeks, so I want the term to be 6 weeks. You don't have to do that. This agreement is really capturing a moment in time where the sales price is this and the compensation is 3. So it's just this moment in time. And for either side, this could become problematic, which is why we have to protect both sides in this. Otherwise, we could find a listing company obligated to pay more than what they agreed to. Okay.
Right. The only proviso on that end date, it has to be long enough for the property to actually go under contract, though.
Right.
Because only when it is under contract does it automatically extend until the under contract transaction is closes or is canceled. So yeah, it has to be long enough to allow it to go under contract.
Yeah, that'll be a good conversation. Hey, Mike, how long is it going to take us to get this worked out? I know. Isn't this fun? I mean, there's a lot of nuances. So, all right. So there's your provisions, listing agreement, buyer agreement, which is just reiterating everybody has their representation. There is a brokerage that on the listing side. There is one on the buyer side. And then there's section 3 that declares and affirms what the BBA is, 3%. Okay. So same language that we just went over. It's the same thing. We're making a declaration on the buyer side what the compensation is in the BBA, which now stops this request to see the BBA by the listing side, right? Okay, so that's 3. Number 4 is pretty straightforward on what are we going to get paid? Well, Mike, you told me it was 3%. The seller was offering 3%. My BBA says 3%. So I just put 3% in number 3. Everybody good?
Will,
Yes.
sorry to get in the weeds, but what about if it's up to 3%?
Well, that's so Mike told me up to, and that's variable, and the broker agreement makes it go from variable to fixed. Okay, so we are no longer variable. When Mike told me it was up to 3, because that's what he was authorized to say, we are now making it fixed. Okay, we're not using in the broker to broker any language that says up to. We are now solidifying that, which is this is the new world, guys. Remember, no unilateral offers of compensation. You never know what you got until it's gone, right?
Got it.
We're like,
Hey,
man,
Will,
those were good old days.
I propose the next time you use that line, you sing it because it's best singed. If you know, you know, you know?
Right.
2 questions. Nancy said, is this version the same as the Park City board?
It is substantially similar, Nancy. There's a few, wording changes and things like that. We don't have a license to use the PCMLS form on the Wasatch Front and for the rest of the company. So we took the tack of revising the UAR form and incorporating a lot of this conceptually. But it's substantially the same. It works, it functions the same. One significant difference, the UAR form includes a arbitration provision. For some reason, PCMLS didn't agree to that, but we're just gonna, in these early days, we're gonna have to deal with different forms on each side.
So just to simplify, I can just use the Park City form and.
Yes.
Yes, you can. That's all you're gonna see on the back. So you might as well get used to the Park City form, but yes, it'll function the same way.
Okay.
I'm looking at them side by side. They really do follow pretty closely the same. So I think they're, without we didn't copy it, right? So we didn't. We
artistic
like
license.
a lot of the structure of it.
And before we begin, Peter, you got a question.
I have a couple questions. So basically, let's assume that you call the agent up and they say, oh, we're paying you 1.5%. And you're like, no, screw that. Here's my buyer broker compensation, and you fill it in at 3. And obviously there's going to be probably some discussion there. Are you just going to go back and forth with addendums about, hey, you want 3, it was 1.5%, go to your buyer? And you're like, no, I'm not asking my buyer. I'm telling your seller to pay me. How's that all going to play out? Are we just going to go back and forth with addendums, or?
It's a great question.
It's very
Mark,
good.
we talked about that again this morning. You can see that there's no mechanism on this form. Go to the bottom of it, Mike, just pan down. Where does it say offer, acceptance, or counter? Like acceptance, rejection, or counter. Does it say that anywhere? Nope. There is no mechanism for countering and bickering back and forth with this document.
So
And
Will,
remember,
wouldn't you
in
just
that
write it in the REPC, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
Right now, you just go to REPC.
That's right.
Where I'm headed, Nancy. Remember, this is between the brokerages. And
Yes.
there's no mechanism to counter it or amend it. If the seller's brokerage just says, no, I told you 1.5, you put 3, I'm not signing this. Then you're going to go right to the REPC and put it in the REPC.
Yep.
And then the seller's brokerage is required to put it in front of the seller, right?
Bingo.
Wouldn't you want to just build it in the REPC right out of the gate? Period.
Well, a lot of agents want to do that. Yes.
And now look, now we feel like you guys are free to do that. Just go. We gave you the addendum you need now. If you want to put it in the REPC and that's better, have at it. If the other brokerage is telling you, hey, it's 3%, thank you for, if that's what you're getting and it's pretty straightforward, then I would recommend using the broker fee agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of times it's not 3%.
Yeah, remember we've been debating this, and I think the best answer is it depends on the situation. Like we had an agent in Park City just raise their hand in kind of frustration and go, "Just tell me what you think I should do." And I was like, "Well, it depends. Okay, it depends on your situation. If it's pretty straightforward on the BBA, the way the BBC, the reason you would do that is because it puts a pin in your commission and it's done. If you're in the REPC, you do run the risk of having that countered with every sales price adjustment. So that you have to just pick what you want here. And none of them are going to be as efficient and as easy as the old system. It's never going to be that way. So this is the new world. If you want to put it in the REPC, and in Peter's situation, I just go right to the REPC. And I would say, yeah, screw it. I'm putting it in the REPC. I'd probably say that. All right, next question.
For offers out right now where I use the brokerage payment addendum is in the REPC, do I need to add this addendum?
Okay, Mark, should we show the other addendum right now? Just so we can put all this together, or should we? Yeah. So there's one more thing we have to add to having the broker agreement in with an offer. Okay. So here's what we woke up to. This has been a couple weeks now. But what if we had an accepted REPC and a non-accepted broker agreement? We're in big trouble, aren't we? I mean, you sent it over, you signed it, your buyer signed your offer, and then you had the seller and buyer ended up, you've got an accepted contract, but you're waiting for the broker to the listing broker to confirm the broker fee agreement, and they never got it to you. And you're under contract now. Mayday, right? Mayday, 911, we're in trouble. Because what inevitably will happen is they'll say, yeah, but your offer was lower. I told you 3% when it was a full price offer. We finally negotiated at $300,000 off of list, and my seller told me to pay you too. You can see how this is going to go. It's ugly. Okay. How do we fix that? If you want to go the broker to broker route, there's a simple solution. It's very simple. We just have to get this language in the contract. It's 3 sentences, or it's really one long sentence, but there's nothing, it's not complicated. That says the offer contained in the REPC is expressly contingent upon buyer's brokerage and seller's brokerage executing no later than, I'll tell you about what date you should put in there, the broker to broker compensation agreement in form and substance reasonably accepted to buyer. Done. What we did is we just made that a condition. And if we find ourselves with an accepted REPC and we have a broker agreement that's not yet executed by the listing side, we're protected because they're tied together now. This is very much like the old world where we had a deal out here and we needed to make sure that was done. So we put it in the REPC, right? Because it was material to the transaction. So that's the simple solution to protect us with the broker to broker situation. Okay. Any questions about that? Oh, let's talk about what date to put in there. I think there's some, if you think about the structure of an offer, what's the first deadline in the REPC? What's the very first deadline in the REPC? Well, it's acceptance, and then
earnest money.
Earnest money. Yeah,
disclosure.
And then it's due diligence, right? So I think early on is when this should be done. Mark, what do we land on? Maybe like earnest money deadline?
Same as earnest money within 4 days.
Yeah.
How about under seller's disclosures?
Well, I would like the buyer to be able to have no argument of cancellation because this is a material term. So I mean, my vote is before due diligence, really. I'd rather it be pretty clear that, this never got worked out. It's a fee for my buyer, and we've requested it, and we anticipated they would sign it at 3%. There's been apparently some pushback on that, and therefore I have the right to cancel.
So, Will, question for you.
Yes.
So my buyer could technically lose out on this house because we wrote an offer because I didn't have all my ducks in a row before we did all of this. How does that look?
I mean, I know that it seems like we're talking a lot about us lately. I know it's a lot about me, and agent, and my commission. And I don't want to get lost about what this is all about. And I think it's a really good point, Nancy. And it's just that we have to be very clear to our buyer clients about what it means to hire me as a professional and the job that I do and the fee in which I charge. Otherwise, someone else will set your value for you. And we can't get around that. We have to make sure we set our value.
And I understand that. I just think that if you have in your buyer broker agreement, right, you've got that 3% in there. I just see, and again, I'm not an attorney, Mark, but my fiduciary is to my client, right? Here it is. And up front, I've got these documents and here we go. And now because of whatever, now I'm holding off presenting this offer, or it's now contingent to, subject to me getting paid on this. And meanwhile, my client loses out. Personally, it just doesn't feel right. But that's just
I think you would just restructure the offer. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to offset the buyer's obligation to you, by making sure that's secure. I mean, if the buyer's comfortable flying without it, I mean, I don't know why they would be. We're trying to offset their obligation.
Yeah, so it's interesting on signing of these buyer broker agreements, and Kevin and Will, I sent you a text last night, but I knew this agent well enough and I was fine enough signing it and the agent was fine enough signing it, and off we ran, even though I didn't have the broker signature on it. And I would think in today's world, and again, I'm just talking Park City, that we're dealing with enough professionals up here and time is of the essence, that if I send you a buyer broker agreement and you sign it, great. If you don't, then I'm just putting it in the contract. In my mind, that's how all of these ideas would play out.
Oh, you mean if you signed the broker to broker compensation?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Look, there's no way else to protect our buyer from having an accepted contract where there's a substantial payment on commission due, that it was anticipated that the seller would cover it if we don't get this language in there. So, I mean, ultimately, if the buyer just decides he's not going to cancel and we need to work it out, well, then what is it? See, this is why it's important to be before due diligence. Right? Because now we're back to, all right, sales price, what I'm getting, all the things that are paid for, including my commission, the inspections, everything. And the buyer can make a determination whether or not they want to move forward. And if they want to move forward, they can. They're just going to have to pay that fee difference on the settlement statement.
Will, may I ask you something?
Sure. Yeah.
Seller's disclosures take place before due diligence.
Yes.
Correct.
Why can't this be I mean, I'm not trying to badger, but why can't the seller just disclose, this is what I'm willing to pay you?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I may have misunderstood the comment earlier. Disclosures can happen. This could be done. Look, the point is to make sure I think before due diligence. That's all.
Yeah.
I think that'd be, I like it earlier, like earnest money time, because the buyer is going to start spending money and things like that. I like that. Next deadline would be seller's disclosures, but you just want to make sure that broker to broker compensation form is agreed to early in the contract, prior to buyer's right to cancel. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what if a builder, new home, spec home on the market, builder says at this price, I'm paying $30,000 in buyer's closing costs. And then an addendum was sitting out there at $30,000, right? And it was like this, like our fee agreement, it's sitting out here. We want it tied to the deal. That's what this form does. And we want to know if the seller is changing his mind because our price is lower on the $30,000. We need to know what that is. It's the same thing. Let's go ahead and empower our buyer to know exactly what they're getting and what they're receiving, especially rebated costs. It seems like we should probably address Section 5 really quick. I know we're running out of time. Wow, this hour goes like so fast. But we should probably address Section 5 of the broker-to-broker compensation. It comes up a lot in the questions. Mark, do you want to just go at this on number 5 of the broker-broker? So we already got 1, 2, 3, and 4 all done. That was pretty simple. Everybody good with that? And then what do we do with 5 and why?
Sure. Section 4 is the seller's brokerage agreeing to pay the buyer's brokerage a certain amount, right? But it starts out subject to Section 5 below. And then we get into 5, notwithstanding Section 4, if the REPC also provides for seller's payment of a buyer's brokerage fee. This is where we have this agreement signed, but then for one reason or another, the buyer and seller also negotiate for compensation in a REPC. Well, this is where we have to protect the listing brokerage, and this is the change. We had to protect the listing brokerage and provide that the negotiation in the REPC would govern the obligations to buyer's brokerage, and this agreement becomes void. Or in the alternative, option B allows for the buyer's brokerage and the buyer to continue to negotiate for additional compensation from seller in the REPC. Well, where would that come up? That would come up if the buyer's broker up in Section 3, let's say it had a 3, right? And Section 4, the seller's brokerage says, I'm only going to pay 2. Well, we want to allow the buyer's broker and the buyer want to continue to negotiate in the REPC to allow for the buyer to ask the seller to pay the additional 1 to fully offset the buyer's obligation to the buyer brokerage. So that would be a situation where you would, to the extent you have a difference in 3 and 4, you would want to check box B in 5B, right?
I can almost read everybody's mind at this point. I would agree. I think at that point, you just go to the REPC.
But
right?
here's a question for you. If I've already got this buyer brokerage signed, because they've asked me to sign it in advance, and I don't have the REPC yet, they haven't sent me the offer because they're sending me the offer after I've already signed this. What do I do?
Yeah. Do sections 3 and 4 match up? The BBA is 3 and the offer is 3?
Yes.
Then you don't need to worry about it.
Easy.
But what do you check in number 5?
It's going to be A if you uncheck. If you don't check anything, it's A. And the same language that's in the PC version. Again, if the buyer and seller somehow, let's say during due diligence, they start negotiating back and forth, and the only way to do the deal is someone starts mentioning commission inside the REPC. This is the protection that we don't end up obligated to more than what they agreed to. So we had to have this this reference to the REPC. If it goes in the REPC of commissions, then let the REPC control.
Right, but right now I've got this form that you've given me. I have no idea what the REPC says. Now I get the REPC. It doesn't have it in there. So now I just don't check any box because I've already signed it because I don't know what's coming up my way.
Yeah, yes. And now this is really the old way. This is the old world, right? We already knew what our commission was going to be obligated to. Now we're just looking at the sales price, knowing what our cost is inside that sales price. Okay, another thing I think we need to clear up. Remember the real estate broker payment addendum? The reason that existed is because we did not have 4.3. Now that we have 4.3, we don't see a lot of use out of that form. You already have it. So just remember, I mean, now, look, we didn't have the 4.3 out like we wanted it to, but we have it now. So now that it's in the REPC, we don't see a lot of use for that. Unless we're trying to confirm that a total payment. And we'll look. We already spent an hour, so I know everyone's busy today. I know there's a lot more questions. We recorded this, and Joe, we do have on the list of all the questions, correct? If anybody, like, I think what we should probably do, let me put a bow on the class and thank everyone. And then we could stop recording in just a minute. And then if you guys want to stick around for Q&A, we'll just hang out for a bit, if that sounds okay. Look, I think I think we're getting it. We're getting better at it. I know it can be confusing, but we simply have two ways to get paid. We can either get it from the REPC and the seller, or we're going to go broker to broker, and we just have to make sure that we address those, or we can have a combination of the two. Frankly, if it gets complicated and there's a combination of two, probably just put it in the REPC. That's probably easier. Now you have the forms to do that. So pay close attention. We'll get these emailed out to everybody. You can use them right away. Joe, you're going to work your magic again. And thank you so much for burning the midnight oil on these forms. It hasn't been easy. We're not relying on dot loop either, guys. Remember, we're very lucky. In-house counsel and someone like Joe, we don't have to wait on dot loop. I mean, this is beautiful. So we can pivot really quickly. If you have any questions, I know all the managers are happy to help. It's our purpose. You're our purpose. So anyway, love you guys. Let's get out there and help somebody, because they sure need a Berkshire agent right now. I mean, could you imagine what everybody is going through right now with no guidance? I told you the other day, one of our agents came up to me, and this is, I won't say the brand, but it's a pretty substantial brand. And they said they've had no training whatsoever on this. I can't imagine it. Anyway, you guys will rock it. Become the master of it. You got this. And we love you guys. We'll sign off.